Hello. I hope you're having an amazing game accessibility conference. I wish I was there in person. Hopefully someday I can be able to come back again in person. It's been a while. I think it was like 2018, 2019. I can't even remember at this point. But it's been a while. Anyway, I hope you're having a great time and you're learning a lot. I wish I could be able to be there. Hopefully, I don't know when by the time I'm recording this, I don't know whether or not I'm going to be able to even be there virtually. But if I am, I'm in the Discord right now. So I hope you're having a great time and learning a lot. I'm definitely going to have to check out some amazing sessions that I really wanted to be able to check out. I'll have to watch the VODs later for that. Anyway, hi, I'm Steve Saylor, and I'm going to be talking about something today that is not necessarily video game related, but it is still in the realm of gaming, and that is tabletop role-playing games, or more specifically, Dungeons and Dragons, and how playing Dungeons and Dragons has sort of taught me some interesting things about accessibility and disabilities that I think could be incorporated not only into your work, but also even into working within studios and even consultants as well. So this has a more broader topic, as it were. So today's topic is called More Than a Saving Throw: How Dungeons and Disabled Shows the Strength of Adaptability. So for those who may not know, I'm Steve Saylor, accessibility consultant, content creator, Twitch ambassador, and also Dungeon Master for the show Dungeons and Disabled. If you notice, we actually have merch. There's a really cool leather jacket. I'm also wearing one of the Dungeons and Disabled t-shirts. You can be able to get that at dungeonsanddisabled.com. But speaking of the show, Dungeons and Disabled is a tabletop role-playing actual play podcast where a bunch of nerdy disabled players plays Dungeons and Dragons and other TTRPGs as well. It is led by me, the Dungeon Master, and it is. I have a picture here of some of my players, not all, but some of my cast that we were able to record some amazing sessions at TwitchCon this year. From left to right, there is Thormangander, myself, Ashlina, Ellie Joy Panic, and Mike the Quad, and we were all able to record some amazing D&D at TwitchCon, and you can be able to check it out. Actually, that series is premiering like right now throughout the entire month of October and a little bit of November. It's called Welcome to Haven's Rest, and it's a really cool kind of like little mini series that we've been doing for the show. Now, Dungeons and Disabled essentially is an actual play podcast where basically this is a show that's dedicated to the disabled community who loves tabletop role-playing games. We want to show the best representation, not only in the simplest of terms, having a space for us to play, but also showcasing how characters in these worlds can be disabled heroes or villains and aren't just stereotypes. Our mission essentially is to try to be able to best represent disabilities and including accessibility within the fantasy setting of Dungeons and Dragons or any other tabletop role-playing games. And I have 3 rules that I go by when it comes to specifically the show. Everyone who sits at our table has a disability, or like either visible or invisible. I've had a wide variety of players with a wide variety of disabilities that have been able to incorporate either within their disabilities within the game itself or within the story itself, but also providing their experiences as a disabled player within the space. And it's been really great to be able to kind of work with them and try to be able to make not only just amazing stories, but also trying to be able to make playing D&D as comfortable as possible around, like working around their basically adapting around their disability. And also the second rule is the players can play as either a disabled character or as a non-disabled character. I never want to be able to force anyone to play with someone with disability because it is a fantasy game. I want them to feel comfortable enough that if they want to play someone without disability and be a hero or a villain in our story, I want them to be able to feel free to do that, because sometimes being in a fantasy world, we want to kind of live outside of our own disability sometimes, and being able to play a hero or villain that essentially that can be able to save the world and be able to do amazing things. I want them to be able to feel free to be able to do that and not let a disability specifically get in the way of how they want to play their character. So I always give them that option. Now, thankfully, and I have been blessed that I've been able to work with players to be able to that they've wanted to incorporate disabilities into their character, and I'll talk about how we've been able to do that in a minute. But I love being able to work with these players in creating amazing story moments and amazing stories, again, that it just best represents people with disabilities. But not every story is about about disabilities in general. I'm always open to be able to create stories that can basically, you could take the disabilities out of the story and it still would be a great story. I never wanted to necessarily fully dictate that story. There has been our first one, which is called Escape from Revel's End, does deal heavily with people with disabilities, and the story is heavily based on that. But our second adventure, It's Only Safe at Night, it has there was basically a whole entire story that essentially could have very easily been in any other actual play show, but I guess we also have people with disabilities within the story as well. So yeah, we just want to be able to give them that option. And then the third rule is literally just to have fun. I always love being able to jump on basically jump onto a show or play at someone's table that their number one rule is to be able to have fun. Yes, the rules and mechanics of a TTRPG system is there to help guide the story and help guide the players to be able to create amazing worlds, and using mechanics to be able to do that or within the systems themselves. But when it is a role-playing game, and there's often times where mechanics kind of can get in the way. So I love it when tables, and including ours, we always have the rule of cool or the rule of fun. Whatever a player wants to be able to do, I am, as a DM, I am all for it. Case in point, great example within the show was that we had a player that decided to seduce a dust devil, and having to be able to role play that out for 20-30 minutes was a very interesting scenario. And it was honestly one of the highlights of the show and one of the most hilarious moments of the show. You can be able to check that out. It's in that moment is in the campaign It's Only Safe at Night, and I believe it's in episode 2, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's in episode 2 or 3. If you want to be able to check that out, it's a really funny moment that I loved. Now, how to incorporate disabilities into D&D? I essentially have kind of like 3 sort of guidelines that I go by when I want working with a player to incorporate disabilities into D&D. Yes, D&D, there is no official mechanics for disabilities in the official rules created by Wizards of the Coast. There are things called Unearthed Arcana, which is homebrew modules that have been created by fans of D&D or players of D&D that is available for any Dungeon Master or Game Master or any players to be able to incorporate into their game. Most famously, sort of an unofficial module is created by Mark Thompson, which is the combat wheelchair. It is most famously was used in Critical Role, where Matt Mercer had created an NPC that used the combat wheelchair within campaign 2 of Critical Role. And I've also used a basic version of the combat wheelchair within Dungeons and Disabled as well. If you want to be able to actually check out some amazing resources on incorporating accessibility and not only just for the players within the game, but also disabilities within the world of D&D itself, or just TTRPGs in general, I have all the resources that we use for the show at dungeonsdisabled.com. I have to give a major shout out to Jennifer Kritchmer, who helped sort of kind of create for me, or create just in general, a kind of core base of resources and guidelines that she has collected that I've been able to use within the game itself. Including the combat wheelchair. So first sort of guideline that I use for the show is let the player decide what and how. I want the player to decide what type of, if they are going to incorporate disability into their character, what disability they want to be able to create. Sometimes it is their own personal disability because it is something that they are very familiar with. It is a lived-in disability, so they want to incorporate that into D&D. But I also want to help sort of create something that is as representative and as authentic to them and the character they want to create as best as possible. So I let the player decide, and then we work together. We always have a session 0 before we even start playing as a group, that I always sit down one-on-one with the player, and we work together to create mechanics that are best represent their disability, because not every mechanic that we use is useful for different for another player with a character with a disability, because as we all know, disability is a spectrum. Oftentimes, what works for one, it doesn't work for another. So we're always basically adjusting and customizing mechanics that fit best to what the character, the player, wants to play. Second guideline is I never give disadvantage for disabilities. For those who may not know D&D mechanics, essentially it is a disadvantage means if a player wants to do something and the Dungeon Master says you roll it at disadvantage, it generally means that it is something that the player may not know how to do, or there is something preventing them from being able to do a task, and they have to roll 2 d20s, and they take the lowest number that is rolled, and that is, and then they add their any modifiers to that, and that becomes their number that they're trying to be able to reach the challenge level that the Dungeon Master has set. I don't, and sort of a common example of what people think that using disadvantage with disabilities is that if you have someone with a motor disability and they want to do something that requires a dexterity check or a dexterity saving throw, oftentimes the most common stereotype is to give the player disadvantage for that dexterity saving throw. I don't do that. I always will allow the player, if they roll a natural 20, I still want to be able to which is sort of like generally kind of seen as an overwhelming success within the game. I still want the players to be able to potentially have an opportunity for success. But if they are playing a motor disabled character and they are doing a task that their disability would normally get in the way, if they roll a nat 20, essentially they may have like a -1 or a -2 to their roll. So they may hit, like, if they don't have any modifiers, they may say, and they have a -2 because of their disability, they would roll an 18. Now that challenge level I have set within the game could potentially be either a 17, which would mean that it's an automatic success based off of their roll anyway, regardless of the minus that they have in the game. But also if say for instance it is a 22 is the challenge level, and their modifier is a minus, then yeah, they may have a success, but it may come with a sort of a caveat or an asterisk. So I never want to like take away that potential moment of a really fun moment within the game because their disability is what got in the way of that. So that's why I never have disadvantage within anything that require, like, a disability would prevent them from being able to do a task or may get in the way of doing a task. And the third guideline is using D&D mechanics to make disabilities authentic. Even though there is no official rules, I want to be able to incorporate the proper D&D mechanics to adapt around a disability. So, for instance, we have an example of we use chronic pain. Several players have used chronic pain as a disability within the game. So we created a mechanic where, using off of some resources that I was able to find online, and we were able to homebrew it for our game, is if at the end of a long rest, which is generally at the end of a night of sleep, a player will roll a d20 die. If they get a 2 or lower, then they get either 1 point or 2 points of exhaustion. Generally, if they roll a 1, that generally is a natural 1, which usually means is an automatic failure within the game. So in this case, for chronic pain, they start the day with 2 points of exhaustion. And basically what exhaustion is within D&D, well, if you have 1 point of exhaustion, that you do have disadvantages on certain saving throws. And if you have 2 points of exhaustion, not only do you have disadvantage on saving throws, but you also have your speed is generally halved. So instead of being able to go 30 feet within 6 seconds, which is generally considered a round within D&D, you can only go 15 feet. Now, you may be wondering, does that contradict basically what my rule is for disadvantage at the table? And in this particular case, it's still using D&D as a mechanic of with disadvantage, but it is still is authentic for a player to within the game that, hey, you know what, chronic pain can be like that sometimes. You may not be able to do certain tasks within the game. So I give them that opportunity to be able to create an opportunity for them to be able to, if they wake up and the chronic pain is just overwhelming and it is a natural one, then I want them to be able to, I want that to still be authentic to the disability. So it's never an automatic disadvantage. It just means it's if they roll something and it does create a point of exhaustion, then that's what gives the disadvantage within the game. So I wanted to be able to incorporate that in the game itself. And that kind of leads to the overall aspect of what I think is every not only just every character or every player, but I think just people with disabilities in general is this. Adaptability is our superpower. We know what our disability can allow us to be able to do or not do. And we generally are always creating scenarios that we can use to adapt to the world around us. We all know how using the social model of disability, how the world can be, it can essentially be disabling to us. So oftentimes we're always creating basically like multiple different plans for us to be able to adapt to the world around us. If there's as an example, if a location doesn't have a ramp, then essentially we would either find a way to either if there's a door that has a ramp, or we find a different location to be able to go to. Like, we always are trying to be able to find ways to adapt to the world around us. And same thing within D&D. We adapt to the world within that is the fantasy setting, the medieval setting that generally D&D sort of sits. We adapt our own disability to the world around us. We are always coming up with different solutions and creative solutions around our disability so that we can still interact and be able to play within the worlds that we're creating. And I think if you kind of look at that from the real world, is that disability, the social model of disability, has limitations, and limitations creates adaptation. We're always creating different sort of scenarios to not use an inspirational phrase like overcoming our limitations, but it essentially is, I think, is just overcoming our limitations is adaptation, and then adaptation allows for creative solutions. If you are working as a consultant or as a developer, we all know when we kind of come across a problem or like that within, say, like a particular feature that we want to create accessibility around. We're always kind of brainstorming different ideas on how to be able to make that feature accessible. And I think that is something that we can be able to use within studios or within our own work, in that, because I want to encourage even people to hire people with disabilities, because we're always being able to come up with creative solutions. I always find that creativity works best when we have limitations, when we have deadlines, when we have sort of limits, if, say, for instance, you don't have in a movie space, if you don't have a budget for to be able to create a film, you have to basically be creative. The filmmakers have to be creative with the budget that they have. Same thing can essentially could be incorporated into video game development too. There's always going to be limitations and sort of like that are different sort of scenarios that we have to kind of fit within this particular box. What adaptation can do is create different solutions using those limits. And oftentimes the best creativity is found within those limits. I always love the example in the film space, the movie franchise John Wick. John Wick was created, the first movie was created for $25 million. Their limit was, their budget was $25 million. And they had to create an entire action film around that. And because their limits were, they only had a certain amount of time to be able to film each of the scenes. They also had only a certain amount of time to be able to get how many on as many takes, so they couldn't. So the the fights, the stuntmen and the choreographers had to basically make sure that everyone knew exactly what to do, and they all were able to pre-plan everything ahead of time, so they can be able to, when on the day when it came to shoot those scenes, they can be able to create it and be able to get within budget. I'm trying to think of a video game example on the top of my head right now, but forgive me, I've been traveling quite a bit, so I can't come up with one off the top of my head. But I think that, kind of using the broad sense, limitation, whenever, because there's always a problem to solve within game development, and there's always limits that we have to sort of stay within. And adaptation is that sort of creative brainstorming that I think disabled people are just adept at. That we have skills in that because we had to adapt to the world around us. We've come up with multiple solutions on how we're able to navigate our world. I think disabled developers, or if you have disabled developers, they are able to think within that box and be able to create amazing solutions for the problems within game development that we never would have sort of thought of before, because we're able to use that adaptability to our advantage and use it for our superpower. I know I'm going above time. I apologize. I hope this is okay, but and I hope this makes sense. But thank you so much for watching and or listening. If you want to be able to get in touch with me, Steve at stevesaylor.net, or just follow me at Steve Saylor everywhere on social media. And if you want to be able to check out the show, Dungeons and Disabled, you can be able to go to dungeonsanddisabled.com. Sorry, Ian, I apologize. This might be a little bit longer than a 15-minute session, but I had a lot to be able to get through. I have a lot to say about this. Anyway, thank you so much. Hope you have a good rest of your conference. Bye-bye.